All right, here we are. Welcome everyone to Sensors 101. My name is Ben Finney. I will be moderating for you today. We're going to give everyone just a minute or two, probably not two, probably just a minute to get situated here. I'd like to point everyone to the chat window where we're asking everyone to tell us where you're coming from. So if you want to take a second and do that, and we will get started. And while you're doing that, the reason I wanted to know that is because I'm going to go ahead and introduce everybody that you probably see on your screen right now. Progress forward. All right, starting from left to right, we have Hannah Graziano, who is coming to you from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. She is our Senior Director of Solution Consultants at FM Systems. Next, we have Travis Kemp, who is coming from Traverse City, Michigan. He is our Global Director of Hardware and Analytics here at FM Systems. Next, we have Andrew Butterworth from Manchester, out of the UK, is what I was told to say, because he's a small town outside of there, I believe. He is our VP of UK Operations. And then also we have one of our guest panelists today is Alex Birch. He is coming from Melbourne, Australia. It is late where he is right now. Thank you, Alex, for staying up with us. He is the co-founder and CEO of XY Sense. And my name is Ben Finney. I am the Director of Global Alliances here at FM Systems, and I am from Nashville, Tennessee. So thank you everyone for being here. We have a truly global presence here on the call, as well as a global panelist. So we're super excited to kick things off with you today. Okay, so moving towards the reason for our webinar today is we're going to talk about sensors. And before we do that, I wanted to just kind of set the record straight of what is a sensor. We get that all the time. And really a sensor can be anything that you want it to be. Anything that you can get data from to use for purposes of analyzing that data can be a sensor. We've had them for years all around us. What you see on the screen here are just some examples of things that we see day in and day out in the corporate workplace environment. You might have sensors at home, though, that you use for a home alarm system. Many of us have been used to sensors in the workplace, at least in the lavatories, for a number of years. So a sensor, again, could be anything that you can get data from. But for purposes of today's webinar, we're really going to focus on 4 different kinds of sensors. Those are desk sensors, which Travis Kemp will be going through with us. Open area sensors, which Alex will be going through with us. Then we've got the environmental sensors that I believe Hannah will be going through, and also people counter sensors that Andrew will be going through. As you can see on this map here, they are used in a number of different places, a number of different applications. And our goal today is to give you a background on each one of these 4 that you see here, how we traditionally see them used, and talk about some use cases, and then have some Q&A. So again, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. We have a truly global panel and a truly global audience. And I am now going to pass things over to Travis Kemp, who's going to take us through the desk sensors.
Appreciate it, Ben. Excuse me. So as Ben indicated, the first sensor type we're going to go through is, we'll call it the desk sensor. It's often referred to as a utilization sensor or a PIR sensor. They all really mean the same thing. This slide really highlights the notion that the desk sensor itself is generally deployed on a one-for-one basis, tied to the number of desks or workspaces you're looking to monitor. Generally speaking, a desk sensor can be placed on or under a desk or within a small cubicle or office space on the wall. Really either option works as far as the deployment goes. Benefits to the desk sensor. So the desk sensor generally is battery powered. You've seen advances in battery longevity over the course of time. Years back, you'd see 1 to 2 year battery life. Now it's not uncommon to see 10, 20, 30 year battery life on specific applications, depending on how they're used. But the desk sensor is a really nice tool for understanding your utilization, your occupancy on a per space basis. As you can see in the screenshot there, each of those red dots represents a sensor under a defined workstation. All of that data aggregates back to a central repository for visibility and digestion. The other main benefit of the desk sensor is it allows you to understand real-time utilization. Generally, you'll see kind of kiosk-style displays in an office entryway that employees will use to navigate one space based on whether a seat is used or not. Additionally, in the market, you'll see integrations with the desk sensor type, whether it's a BMS, BAS system. We have a number of clients that control their lighting or HVAC systems using a myriad of desk sensor technologies. And the big thing this ultimately comes back to is growing revenue by adopting co-working strategies to rent and share unused space. As employers are coming back to office, they're thinking through how their space is or isn't going to be used compared to how it was used, whether it's hoteling or a hybrid workforce. The desk sensor provides that analytical insight into how this space is or isn't being used, and is really a powerful tool for things like integrations. As we go forward, all of the sensor types you're going to see here can be integrated one way or another with additional applications. But I did want to kind of focus on a couple areas that FM Systems has worked to integrate. So the first is, a desk sensor can be integrated with a booking system and tied with your reservation, checking in and checking out of office space, conference room space, this, that, and the other. Based on the sensor alone and the human entering that space, you can drive the booking application to auto check-in or check-out, depending on availability within that room. All of which just contributes to a more automated workflow and things like that. Additionally, we've done things such as tying our utilization desk sensor into a safe space solution for cleaning statuses. So as companies return to work, things like sanitation and cleanliness are, say, more important than they would have been prior to 2020. We've, just an example here, we've created a workflow that the cleaning staff can use to denote whether a space has been cleaned or sanitized, and really give employees a peace of mind that they're working in a safe environment. Just one example. Another example would be tied to a concept we're calling congestion alerts, right? So this is a situation where we want to go back to the office, but we don't really want to go back to the office at full capacity. Maybe we want to cap it at 50, 60%, but how do we know if we're at 50, 60%? Using that sensor data tied to software applications, we can trigger automated emails or SMS messages to alert key individuals within that organization that they're nearing capacity or are at capacity. Again, really just one of many ways that sensor data can be integrated, tied to your specific use case. Here you see a live floor plan. So again, this would be seen in the lobby area of an organization. Each of those colored dots represents a different status state of those defined workspaces. Green representing free or unused workspaces. Yellow indicating recently used workspaces that may or may not still be occupied. So think of a situation where you go grab a cup of coffee, you walk across the hallway to go speak to an individual, maybe you need to pop into a conference room for a quick meeting. That's where the yellow status populates. And the red status represents a booked or occupied space. So upon entering a lobby, you can quickly see where you should sit, where you should not sit, things like that. All of this data, I will say, renders in near real time. So as you see the workforce, using the spaces differently, those dots will change, very quickly.
Travis, just to pause, if you go back one there, I want you to walk me through kind of what we're seeing here. Obviously the yellow, red, but how often are we seeing this? Where are we seeing this in the workplace? How are companies utilizing this? in their own workplace environment. Obviously, this is a picture of a screen, so kind of walk us through that if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. So physically, again, it's generally in the lobby or entry point of an office. Um, you know, where we are now with kind of coming back to work. This is incredibly important, especially when you have a hybrid workforce that may be in the office a couple days a week, maybe remote a couple days a week. Also, in situations where individuals don't have defined workspaces, they're free to hotel wherever the case may be. This is a valuable tool to walk in very quickly, nearly immediately, be put in a position where you can say, okay, I need to go sit here, or I don't need to go sit there. But just kind of helps with that overall workflow. We see it a lot with roaming sales forces where, a sales team maybe doesn't, is at a new office every couple months or every couple weeks rather. This helps them kind of navigate that floor, where to sit, where not to sit, like I said, almost immediately.
And because this is just a sensor, I can't know that I need to avoid Travis by going to the upper right instead of going to the left, correct?
That's
Not that I would
exactly
ever
right.
want to avoid you, but
No, absolutely not. But you touch on something that's important, and that's just the concept of anonymity, right? So all the data is completely anonymous. It doesn't know Travis from Ben from Steve, but it does know that an individual was at a defined space, and that technology is largely driven by passive infrared sensors. Those sensors detect occupancy by way of a combination of movement and heat, and that triggers really the dot status there on the image.
That's great. Thank you.
The second sensor type is going to be tied to the environmental sensor. So this is a really kind of emerging sensor market that is becoming even more important as you think about a return to work. We'll go into the types of environmental readings that the market is supporting right now. But tied to the use case, once integrated with BMS or BAS systems, you can greatly reduce your energy consumption, your lighting consumption. You can tailor your lighting and heating kind of time on and off based on the actual needs of your office staff. You can reduce your carbon footprint by allocating HVAC or lighting based on actual real-time demand, like I said, versus theoretical demand. And all of this is in support of meeting or exceeding WELL and LEED building standards, which are very important, right? As we think about the types of environmental factors that are important to one's organization, utilization, again, driven by that PIR sensor, but other things such as temperature, humidity, air pressure, light, noise, air quality by way of TVOC, which stands for total volatile organic compounds. And then you see ECO2 or CO2 as kind of the de facto air quality standards on the market. And really to FM systems and the market as a whole, the sweet spot comes in when you're able to combine data sets and really look at things like, how does air quality impact utilization? How does temperature impact utilization? How does temperature and air quality play off one another? Very important as you think about the well-being of your staff. One other thing I'll say quickly on environmental sensors is the market supports a couple different approaches here, right? You can deploy what I'll classify as an all-in-one sensor, so a single sensor that monitors many different environmental metrics. Or if you don't need all the environmental metrics, there are other sensors that support, say, one or two of the metrics that really kind of custom tailor your need.
This is incredibly interesting, not from just the workplace environment, from just the really environment we're in right now. I know with me personally, I have young kids, and the big talk right now is back to school. And in the US, the CDC is actually saying, if you can have that, I forget what the word is, but the ventilation, right? The proper ventilation, all those things that lend themselves to a healthy environment. I mean, not only do you get a better environment for work, but this is something where the world is really going right now. Is this something that kind of we've seen pushing more and more in the status of the last 18 months, say?
It really has. It's really picked up, specifically over the last 6 to 9 months, and I think it's tied to that return to work. And I think the other thing, the other observation is that not all clients are aware that these sensor types exist, right? So there's a bit of education that takes place, but I think once they're able to see that data, they're able to make some pretty informed decisions based on that. The other thing I'll say from a deployment standpoint with environmental sensors, unlike the desk sensors, you don't really need an environmental sensor under every single workspace. We generally recommend a ratio of about 1 to 10. So for roughly every 10 desk sensors, one environmental sensor generally suffices. And the placement of that sensor is important, right? You don't necessarily want to place a temperature sensor directly next to a heating duct or behind a hot printer, things like that. So the placement does play a role there. But once installed, it is quite effective, and we're seeing quite a bit of traction there. So here's an example of how an end product can come together. You see the environmental readings there on the right. Those readings can be filtered based on day and times. You can really drill down into how temperature, air quality, pressure, noise played a role at any single given point in time. Additionally, once tied in with a floor plan, you're able to basically pick and choose which environmental sensors you want to render data against. So you can really drill down and hone in on your specific use case, things like that. Very powerful. And from here, I'll kick it back to Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Travis. Appreciate that. That was very informative. This actually brings us to the point in our webinar of our first poll. So our background, Alicia extraordinaire, thank you. What are you most interested in learning about with sensor solutions? So if everyone could just take a few seconds and mark those off, and we will actually see some of these start to populate here on the screen. And I'm just looking at live results here as they're coming in. Far and away, it looks like we're leading with understanding space utilization, but the desk and room reservations and optimizing the real estate portfolio are definitely coming in closely in the second there. But definitely, it looks like the overwhelming majority is understanding space utilization. That's pretty incredible. I appreciate everybody taking that. And again, if you have questions, don't forget about that chat window. We're definitely going to have a time at the end for Q&A. So while you're navigating through, please go ahead and put any questions you might have in there, and we'll make sure we get to them at the end as we open it up to our panels. Thank you, Travis. And now I am actually going to pass it to Alex Birch, our guest panelist. Thank you, Alex, for joining us, and he's going to tell us about the area sensors.
Great, thanks, Ben. It's great to be here. So I'm Alex from XYSense, and through my 15 years in the industry, I've seen all different types of sensors to help workplace space usage. Over this time, understanding utilization has been a top problem for real estate executives, but now it's even more of an issue. Organizations are experiencing the challenge of a new hybrid world, along with low utilized offices and all that downsizing pressure. At XYSense, we make a sensor that is in this relatively new category, which is called area sensors. These sensors are typically installed in the ceiling and look down into the workplace, and they often look a little bit like a smoke detector or a wireless access point. The technology inside area sensors varies in the market. Sensors range from thermal or heat technology to Wi-Fi or to computer vision. At XYSense, we use computer vision, and that means we've trained an artificial intelligence algorithm offline to understand and recognize people. We then deploy that algorithm to the sensor. Area sensors are typically able to understand and see people and pinpoint their location onto a floor plan. Most area sensors are anonymous without identifying who the individuals are. They're able to recognize people across any different type of space, whether it's breakout, kitchen areas, traditional work points, or conference rooms. Generally, the coverage range of an area sensor is larger than a single desk. So when we saw before from Travis with the under-desk sensors, that's a one-to-one. With an area sensor, you can put it up and it can see a range of things. In fact, whatever's in range, it'll be able to identify the people that's using that space. And what that means is typically you need fewer of them to cover your entire space. Lastly, different area sensors have different capture rates, often dependent on whether they're battery or not. So varying that from real time to potentially up to 5 to 10 minutes, taking a sighting every 5 to 10 minutes. Generally at XY Sense, our mantra is the more real time, the better, as it means you can see, verify, and trust the data the sensors are capturing. As we've already seen, there are many different types of sensors to measure space usage. This pyramid shows how different sensors fit in. Often a common first step is actually to use badge swipe data or observation studies. Badge swipe data is usually only available for badging in and not badging out, and it doesn't tell you which individual spaces in the building are being used. Observation studies or bed checks, where people walk around with a clipboard, typically are short-term only and don't give you a bigger picture. Moving down the pyramid, desk space utilization, which we just saw from Travis, most commonly through PIR sensors, they give you a binary view of which desks are used. It can be in real time as well, but they don't extend potentially to collaboration spaces, breakout spaces, those sorts of spaces. And then moving further down the pyramid, room sensors either, they can count the number of people entering and exiting the room. They can rely on people to check in or else risk having the booking cancelled. Or you can have pucks at fixed locations under the tables. And finally, area sensors give you all of the above like we described, but also the flexibility to understand all different types of spaces and count the number of people using those spaces, as well as understand where people have moved. With the rich data set of information being captured from area sensors, you're actually able to get a more complete picture about overall space usage, from soft seating areas all the way through to standard work points. The overall coverage enables tools to fuel new hybrid workplaces, understanding neighborhood and team usage, as well as predicting capacity trends. Real-time area sensors can be tied into space reservation tools similar to the desk sensors that we saw earlier to automatically check in bookings without the need for a QR code scanning or launching up an app on your phone. Especially with real-time area sensors where sightings are occurring every 2 seconds, this provides wayfinding feedback instantly for a better workplace experience. Lastly, as sensors are not tied to an individual piece of furniture, they're actually able to cope with many types of changes in layout without the need for physical maintenance.
Alex, quick question for you. I want to make sure because it's something Travis highlighted. Tell us about how these sensors maintain that layer of anonymity and being anonymous. I can't say the word compared to say what he just went through with the PAR. I think that'd be great for everybody to hear.
Sure. So the anonymity, in fact, that's how we actually, for us personally, anonymity and privacy is one of the biggest pillars and requirements for having utilization sensors. So we call ourselves XY Sense because only anonymous XY coordinates leave the sensor. The technology underlying, it's trained to understand and recognize people, but it doesn't identify who the people are. And as all that's leaving our sensors is anonymous XY coordinates, that really instills confidence and trust in how the system works. Okay, hopefully that answers that question. Where am I? So just to declare my bias up front and recognizing that XY Sense does have its own area sensor, I think it's still useful to talk about some of the things to look out for when considering area sensors. So firstly, the coverage of a sensor is really important. And if you think about it, the smaller the coverage, the more sensors you need to install. And that drastically contributes to the total cost of ownership. Seen sensor installations where there's a requirement for 2 to 3 times the number of sensors because of the coverage. And when you add that up across an enterprise or a building, it really stacks up. Some area sensors are based on Bluetooth or Wi-Fi usage. And these devices actually rely on a person carrying a device, such as a cell phone or having an app installed, etc. We believe it's best to have a sensor that understands where people are, regardless of what device they're carrying or who they are, because it gives you a complete picture of coverage of the space with less gaps. Another important factor to consider with area sensors is how real-time is the data capture. Can you see what the data is being captured, or is it hidden in aggregations and delayed? So if someone asked you how many people did you have in your office last week or yesterday, it's quite hard to remember. And so many times in the past, I've seen questions on utilization reporting where people actually question the data and say it's wrong. And it's really hard to verify that unless you've got something in real time that you can pull up and show people, and then they can actually see that it is exactly what they say it is. An interesting one is battery versus wired. And when you're considering these sorts of sensors, the open area sensors, they actually consume a little bit more energy than the desk PIR sensors. And as a result, that's why you get the extended maybe sightings once every 5-10 minutes versus every 2 seconds in real time. So something to consider for battery-powered open area sensors is they actually drain their energy based on the number of people or traffic underneath. So they'll run out of energy or run out of battery at different times, which means you've got this logistics problem of having to swap batteries out. Also to consider is the sustainability aspect of batteries. A large deployment for a multinational could actually result in 0.5 ton to 1 ton of battery waste every 2 to 3 years. Having accurate data from area sensors is the first hurdle. Second to that is powerful analytics that can provide meaningful insights in an easily accessible way. So I'd encourage you to look out for the depth of data. Is there reporting on teams, neighborhoods in an agile workplace? Does the analytics provide insights and recommendations into creating the most optimized workplace experience? Things like that, which delve into going further than just presenting you the information and then leaving you to do the homework to work out exactly what to do as a result. And last but not least, as Ben already mentioned, privacy and security is really critical. So like I said, with XY, we believe privacy is almost one of the top considerations for selecting the right sensor. For our sensors, the technology underlying, like I said, is computer vision. And all that leaves our sensor is anonymous XY coordinates of people, hence our name, XY Sense. So we've built them from the ground up to instill this confidence. And not every area sensor is actually created equal here. Other sensors actually allow images to leave the sensor for calibration and configuration on site, so you can see images of the office. And for us, that was a definite no-no and something that is a point I would recommend to look out for. Okay, so that gives you a high-level view of what area sensors can do. That's it from me from now, and I'll hand it back to you, Ben.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, appreciate you running us through that. Definitely very interesting and unique way to capture data there with area sensors, one that wasn't really even thought of, call it 5 or 7 years ago. So definitely appreciate you walking us through that. Now, this brings us to our next poll question. So if everyone's fingers are feeling kind of down, please feel free to warm them up. And our next poll question is, when do you plan to return to the workplace? I think this is going to be very interesting to see, as we have a ton of different people from across the world with different countries and mandates. So I'll give everyone just a minute to look at that, and we will get going. So just looking at the data here, this is pretty, actually, I'm kind of surprised by this. It says we're about tied neck and neck with we have already returned in 2021, which makes sense because we are in the year 2021, with some 2022 and then some still undecided. Looks like everyone's had a chance to look at that. So we're going to move on to our next part of the presentation, where I am going to pass it over to Andrew Butterworth, who's going to tell us about a different kind of sensor. Andrew, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ben. So yeah, this section, we're going to look at what are known as people counter sensors. Some other people know them as flow counter sensors. And these are particularly useful when you want to look at the number of people in a space. You're not necessarily worried about where they are in the space. You just want to look at how near to capacity, for instance, so in a building or on a floor or in a room. These sensors were originally developed for the retail sector, and they would help clients understand the movement of shoppers around stores and through checkouts, etc. But over the past, I would say, 4 to 5 years, we're starting to see increased usage of these sensors outside of the retail sector. Large uptake in usage within higher education, where a client will want to potentially measure the capacity or how many people are in a lecture theatre, for instance, or in a building, how many people are in my building at any point in time. These sensors can, they would be positioned over an ingress or egress point, and can give you real-time data for how many people are in the building, on a floor, or in a room at any point in time. These sensors, slightly different to the open area sensors Alex just talked about, and again different to the ones that Travis talked about. These use 3D stereo vision technology, so they're using camera technology, but similar to Alex and XY Sense, privacy is of paramount importance with these sensors. And again, like the XY Sense sensor, only metadata leaves the sensor, so we have no imagery leaving the sensor. There are, in this particular sensor, we have up to 4 levels of privacy protection built in to the sensor itself. These aren't battery powered sensors. These are powered PoE, so power over Ethernet, but very accurate in what they can do. Very robust. You get up to 99, and actually that's the not published figure, but I have lots and lots of these deployed worldwide, and often get much higher than 99% accuracy. Very intelligent sensor in as much as it can count bi-directionally, so it understands a person walking in and walking out of a space. One of the other things that's been developed recently with this sensor and is starting to see an uptake is this queue length and dwell time measuring capabilities. Again, initially developed for the retail sector. People, stores want to know what's happening and where people are going. But what it's also finding usages in is with some large multinationals, where, for instance, like canteens, how long's the queue at the canteen? How long, not how many people, but how long have people been in that queue? Is another area where these can be used. They also have a very useful feature, which is what we call the multi-sensor feature, which is basically we can stitch the sensors together, and we can up to 9 of these sensors can be stitched together at any point in time, so that a body, and again the anonymization, I'll try and get it out, is the same as with the PIR and with the area sensor. So a person entering is only seen as a body, but with the multi-sensor stitching approach, that person can be tracked, or that body can be tracked through all 9 of the sensors. So you can start to kind of see the movement of people as well within a defined space. Again, very similar to, we can do movement of people with the area sensor. Obviously, we can't do movement of people with the PIR sensor, but we are starting to see a lot more uses for this type of sensor in the corporate real estate place.
That's very interesting, Andrew. And tell me, so I imagine since this is ingress and egress, it's probably not uncommon for companies and workplaces to have kind of a mix of sensors. It sounds like ingress, egress, but then also maybe something else once people are in there to understand where they're going. Is that safe to assume?
Definitely. I'm a very strong believer in there isn't one sensor that fits all. And I think with the this new hybrid office of the future where we're going to have desking, we're going to have collaboration spaces, we're going to have lots of different spaces. And for me, the thing at the moment is we don't know what we're going to have. There's going to be lots of iterations of people are going to be let's try this, see how it works. Let's try this, see how it works. And, one of the real things you need that data. People who had sensors in the past have got some historical data. How relevant that historical data is in today's world, I don't know, but at least you have a starting point. I always reference this. We're all starting with a blank canvas. Those who have historical data can at least put a base coat on. Those with no data have really got to start thinking about mixing the paint. And we've really, we're going to get small phone booths. Do we really want to put an area sensor in a phone booth that's for single occupancy? No, we can put a PIR sensor in there. We're going to have collaboration and soft seating spaces. Can we use PIRs there? No, we can't. They don't work in that environment. Area sensors, ideal for that environment. But then we might have spaces where we just want to know how many people are in the space, not necessarily what they're doing. People counter sensors.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I think it definitely all starts with when somebody walks in to that space, right? That's where everything starts. So you get that baseline, and then you just you combine all the data. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. That's
Thank
it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. That kind of concludes the overall, not the webinar, but that concludes kind of the 101, if you will, on the different kinds of sensors. But what we wanted to do from here is actually share some real world examples of how this has been working. So Hannah Graziano is going to take us through one of these case studies. So thank you, Hannah.
Thanks, Ben, and good afternoon, everybody. So first, taking a look at one of our finance clients. This is a global organization that was faced with optimizing their real estate portfolio. They own and lease properties in some of the most expensive cities in the world. So as they set out to achieve this initiative, they installed 40,000 sensors initially, and within 18 months had recognized savings of over $45 million. And that's just not the first year, but that's year over year. So by installing sensors, figuring out where they had underutilized spaces, they were then able to right-size their portfolio. They transformed underutilized desks and activity-based working transformed those underutilized desks into activity-based working areas such as huddle rooms or breakout areas, therefore ensuring that employees had adequate space for either heads down work or collaborative work. Eventually, they did go on to install sensors in additional office locations and now have around 100,000 sensors deployed worldwide. One last thing that I'll mention that is not called out on this slide is that in right-sizing their portfolio, they were also able to reduce their carbon footprint. That was another major initiative of the organization, and it's not just us telling you this, but it was actually included in their quarterly and annual reporting. So there are those downstream effects or those side effects as well that sensors can really play a benefit, or kind of we can leverage sensors to help with those initiatives.
Yeah, I think super important point there at the end is that's something we're seeing a lot, is the corporate carbon footprint responsibility. So that is, and not only is the monetary gain here, but there's a world gain as well. Thank you, Hannah. And so Andrew, I think you have a couple that you wanted to walk us through as well. So I'll pass the mic over to you to talk through a couple more of our real world examples here.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Just to add on to what Hannah said, I've been working with that client for 5 years now. But going back to what I was saying about the new hybrid office, so they've had, it's 100,000 PIR sensors they've got deployed worldwide. But we're currently now in conversation with them about deploying our area sensors as well, because they are moving to a new hybrid environment, and they're putting test labs, for want of a term, in a lot of their buildings. So they've been a massive user of sensor technology, and also understand that the data is extremely relevant. As you can see, $45 million annual saving is a significant return on an investment of what was probably around $1.3 million at the time. So just moving on to this case study, this is related to the people counter sensors, and as it says there, it's in the higher education sector. About 4 years ago, we were approached by what is one of the top four universities in the United Kingdom. They needed a way of understanding the usage of their lecture theatres, large spaces with 100, 200, 300 seats in, which a PIR sensor was just not the cost-effective solution. But with most of these lecture theatres only having one or two entrance/exit points, the people counter sensor lent itself to that solution. They currently have 450 plus of the sensors across their campus, and they're helping them better understand the usage of the lecture theatres. And the one thing they've been able to do with the data is improve their timetabling and better match the size of the lecture, i.e. the number of students, to the appropriate lecture theatre. One of the things they were finding, there was, they would have a 20 student lecture, and they were holding it in a 100-seater lecture theatre. So, that's a great benefit to them. Actually, as it happens, and it's not bad, that same client also has 6,000 PIR sensors deployed throughout its campus in its libraries, and they're using that for student experience. So they've developed their own app using the API and created an app so a student can log on and look at the 27 libraries that are on the campus to see how many of the seat positions in each of the libraries are being used. So if they want a quiet environment, they can look for the least used. Or if they want to, meet up with people, they could look potentially at a busier library. So that's one sector. Now, this one is again going back to what I was saying at the beginning of the people counter. If you're looking at just how many people are in my building, I'm not bothered where they are, but how many people are in there. And this is a medical research organization in the US who, as part of the pandemic, they've had to greatly reduce the capacity of its headquarters building. And they have, I think off the top of my head, I think it's about 50 of the people counter sensors deployed on all their entrance and egress points to their building. And they are using that to provide real-time alerts advising when they're nearing capacity. And they're finding that to be a very useful tool. That's my two, Ben. I think it's back to Alex.
Thank you. Alex, I was going to walk us through an area sensor. So thank you, Alex.
Sure, over to me. So this case study involves a multinational, do I need to switch? Here we go. This case study involves a multinational technology company. So they deployed the XY Sense area sensors across all of their space types, from the traditional work points to conference rooms, kitchens, breakout spaces, you name it, across the whole space. That gave them the complete picture of how all their space types are being used. This organization are actually growing quite rapidly, and the data really helped them to provide a great experience to their people because they were transitioning from fixed seating to agile seating. And this was pre-pandemic. So we helped them do that in an optimal manner. We're able to instill confidence in their teams that their reduced desk capacity wouldn't actually impact their day-to-day operations, because there's a real fear of that transition or change. We actually used simulations on whether they'd overflow and predicted trends on how fast they were growing to provide them with the right amount of space. And then using the real-time view, we're able to help alleviate any pushback where there was people questioning if the data was correct or not. And that was all pre-pandemic, but now we're helping them with the new normals in a hybrid world. And what they're really interested in is, how is their work style changing? Are people coming into work purely to collaborate, or are they still coming into work to spend time at their work points to work solo? And basically, where is the friction in the workplace? So we're continuing to roll out more and more sensors with this customer across regions for them. Okay, over back to you, Ben.
Hey, Ben, I think you're muted. Sorry.
You know what? I was just telling everyone that I'm now standing and adjusting my camera because my back was hurting from sitting for so long. All great use cases, and I appreciate everybody sharing. We're going to have some time now for everyone to ask questions and to submit those. So we have some that have already been submitted that I'll be referencing over on a separate screen. But please feel free to ask those now. And we're also, as we do that, we're going to have a final poll question. And I will pull up that final poll question now. That poll question is very relevant. Which sensor types are you currently leveraging? Very interested to hear this from everyone. What type of sensors are being deployed today, or have you not? And that is the exact reason why you're on this webinar. I'll give everyone just a minute to do that, and also please don't forget to submit your questions. So it looks like that is the exact reason why most people were here, because we're getting most responses here. It looks like at none, with environmental and the PIR coming closely. Well, I think they're exactly tied there. So definitely some interesting data there to take away. I'm going to turn now to I'm going to look in the chat, and I'm also going to look at some of our submitted questions previously. And we're just going to ask the experts here from the panel. So I'm going to start with one here. And I'm going to open this one up to the group, actually, of everyone, because I'm interested to see, I think there's different, probably different people out there. And the question is kind of multi-sectioned, but the first one is there a single vendor source that manages both the hardware and software with an interface and also ties back to a building automation system? And I'm going to ask the experts if they know of anything like that, or if they've ever worked with anything like that. Andrew, I think I'm going to point to you first and call you out, because I know you've been doing this for a long, long time. Have you ever seen something where you have the hardware, software interface, and a building management system? Does that even exist yet, where all those worlds are combined?
I think with the exception of the building management system, yes, they do. You know, obviously I work for FM Systems, but you know, if you look at what we've got, we have the hardware, we have the software. You know, from a hardware perspective, yes, we partner with other organizations, Alex being one, XY Sense, but you know, and for me, I go back to what I said, one sensor doesn't fit all. And it's having that piece of software that will allow you to bring in data from multiple data sources to give you a true picture of what is happening within your building. So yes, I think there are organizations who have both hardware and software. I do know of organizations that just have hardware and don't have any software. They give you an API, but you have to create your own bit of software.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think I'm not sure I've seen one where it's all in one, where it's the building management system, and I think that's by design, because you know, if you're focused on the building management system, you want somebody to be really focused on that you know, that automation and management. You don't necessarily want them worrying about a sensor if the building is 80 degrees and everyone's supposed to come back to the office, right? So that makes a whole lot of sense. There's a second part to another question I had that came in here. Is there a system that can monitor different furniture configurations? For example, workstations, hoteling, conference rooms, and collaborative spaces. Alex, this one feels like it should be pointed in your direction. Have you seen that before?
Basically, that's what an area sensor is. So long as it's within range of sight, and for ours it's line of sight, we can see around about 1,000 square foot or 95 square meters. And if there's whatever space type is there, whether it's collaboration space, standard work points, etc., we're able to count the number of people in each space within that. And we do that by geofencing different types of space and tagging that space as a desk, that space as a soft seating area, that space as a conference room, etc.
Yeah, and I would argue that with everyone going back and social distancing and really those public common areas instead of closed confined quarters, I think this is something that's really going to pick up here over the next 12 to 18 months. Let me go to the next question here. And this is going to be one to the group, so anyone chime in here because I'm interested to see the answers myself. And this question is, with so many different sources of information already, like access control, attendance registers, room booking, etc., how do sensors add value to the workplace utilization for large corporate entities? And everyone fire away.
Yeah. I'll start. I think the biggest thing, and it's fairly blanket in nature, is that it removes any opinions, and it provides a data backed decision, right? When you have sensors providing data, and that data is able to be mined, it takes all opinions out of the question, and really makes those conversations with the senior leadership teams a bit more easy, specifically when you look at data over a long period of time, and we see things tied to seasonality with sensors, where specifically in the US, things like Q4 is a little less attendance heavy, tied to holidays, and so when you look at that data set over a full year, again, it just makes those business decisions much more straightforward, and again removes opinions.
One of the things I would add, I was just going to say that, if you think back to pre-COVID times, there was a move. There was kind of a move on the sensors just providing utilization data. That was what they thought. 10 years, 12 years ago, when sensors started to appear on the market, they were brought out for one reason only: measure the utilization of a space. And what you've seen over the years is, yes, they still get used for that, but as organizations, even before COVID, started moving to agile working and non-fixed desking, people, the employee experience, the ability to walk into a building and just see what was available and where was available. Picking up what Travis showed on the PIR section, where he showed the live view and that screen in the lobby. I have a client in central London who's in a 31-story building, who has that live floor plan on every floor as you exit the lift lobby, and straight away a person can come out of the lift lobby and straight away see where is available and where's not available. And picking up on something that Alex said about one of the other ways that you used to measure utilization was with the bed checks, or I would refer to it, because I'm from the north of England, as a flat cap and clipboard method. But that is a single point in time survey, and you measure something there as being occupied, unoccupied, or appears occupied. And the problem with that type of survey is that appears occupied. That appears occupied can skew the data by anywhere up to 30%. That appears is there's a cup of coffee on the table, or there's a coat on the back of the chair. But the surveyor, the person doing that study, doesn't know if that coffee's hot or cold unless he goes and sticks his finger in it. He doesn't know if the coat was left there from the day before, because they arrived in a coat, but it was still warm when they left. So,
yeah, that's great. Thank you. A couple of Q&As here that we've got from one from Brian Marsh. Are mobile apps or reservation systems available where employees can utilize from their mobile phones to reserve spaces? Hannah, I'm going to point this one to you, because I think this might be what you do a lot.
Yes. So So definitely, Brian. And I think we subtly called this out in one of Travis's slides, but really our sensor solution and reservation solution work well together. So it can not only integrate with the reservation data, but also we can use the sensors as a way of checking in or automatically vacating someone if they don't show up. And there are mobile solutions that are tied to that as well. So being able to book from a mobile app or from a floor plan. So the short answer, I guess, is yes, we definitely see that often and provide those solutions as well.
That's great. Thank you. And another one, Brian, I saw in the chat as well. Do you offer turnkey service that will work with corporate IT groups and integrate existing software used such as Crestron and MS Exchange? I'm going to take a stab at this one, and I'll let the team back me up here. But turnkey service in this world can be a little tricky because, as you can see, there's even multiple companies that work here today. You know, we have XY Sense, we have FM Systems. There's a number of companies out there. And you also mentioned Microsoft and Crestron. So a turnkey service, yes, that is available. We typically will look to kind of a consultant to do that, right? Because we all have our own niche, if you will, where we can do certain aspects of it. That turnkey service is typically done by some of our partners that we have out there in the market that are doing this, and they bring all those pieces together in one spot. And I'll let the team kind of add on anything to that if you want to add anything to it.
Yeah, I'll just say, you know, every company, every vendor has their own kind of approach. One of the approaches, you know, FM Systems has taken is to be fairly sensor agnostic and really find the right solution for our clients and our valued stakeholders that meets their, you know, business needs. So I think every one of those, you know, to be client sensor agnostic, you obviously have to handle a number of integrations. You know, and I know Alex is very proficient. I'd love to hear what he has to say about integrations, but I think it's all certainly doable within the realm of possibility. It's just really kind of sitting down and executing the heads down integration work.
Mm-hmm. So I guess to add to, I agree with all of that. To add to that, I mean, Crestron have the panels as well as the sensors. They will serve definitely a purpose. They're available to, if someone comes into the room, you can check them in automatically. You don't have to cancel back that booking. With the open area sensors, you get the number of people in the room, and is someone at a whiteboard or someone at a desk. And that's a slightly higher level of granularity in terms of what the data is available, but fit for purpose, as Travis says. If you have Crestron sensors already in all your conference rooms, it makes sense to use them.
That's great. Thank you. So we have 3 minutes left here, so I'm going to go to make sure there's not any more questions that I've missed, and I'm going to go to the pre-submitted questions, and we'll ask one or two more, and then we'll say bye-bye to everyone across the globe. One more question here. Let's see. How to gather, this is going to be one to the group because I think everyone has faced this challenge that's on this call. How do we gather buy-in for deployment of sensor technology? And I imagine that means from the organization. You got to get buy-in from a number of stakeholders, and we'll let everyone answer, and that'll be our last question for today.
Sure, I'll go first briefly, just in the sake of time. So I think with any sensor deployment, and it's not just for sensors, you know, there's a change management process, right? And I think, you know, just clearly communicating the why behind the sensor selection is important. I think in terms of getting to the point to say yes, I think it has a lot to do with actually understanding the data and really understanding how the data benefits your organization, and you know, kind of conversely, thinking through how are you making decisions absent of that data, right? You know, are you really putting your organization the best foot forward absent of that granular data itself?
I'd just add, you know, just going back to this, you know, this new normal, this hybrid, you know, people could say, well, we don't, you know, pre-COVID, people could say we don't need data. We've got the office. We've been using it like this for years and years and years. We know what's going on. The problem you have now moving forward is the world is changing. The office environment is changing. even more now, data on how do I use my office and how is my office used is of the utmost importance.
That's great. Thank you, Andrew.
And I might just quickly add one more thing to augment that. I think that understanding space utilization is super valuable for organizations. There can sometimes be pushback from end users of the space, not knowing what the data is being used for. Is there something that's impacting me? And typically we see there's better buy-in when there's end user buy-in. So all the inhabitants of the space, and there's integration to make it better for them. So workplace experience apps like desk booking, etc., and feeding that information in. Then there's something in it for me versus I feel like I'm being monitored. And so having that more ubiquitous coverage can benefit a rollout, definitely.
Yeah, one thing I always remind people is like, what problem are you individually trying to solve, and what problem is your boss and your boss's boss trying to solve? If you solve those, then the buy-in is a lot easier, right? Before we wrap up here, I want to point everyone to the handout section. There is a handouts section here in your if you click on it there next to offers under the Q&A and chat. Feel free to download any of that to take it with you. But I think that concludes our Sensors 101 today. I appreciate everybody's time. This has been a great global appearance here from both our panelists and our attendees. So thank you, everyone, for your time, and hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.